Okay, so that's how. So we had discussed, and so you have these vidhi vakyas and these arthavada vakyas from where you have to conclude that there is a vidhyamsa. Only from the stuti vakya, you can also do it from arthavada. And therefore, there is a stuti that vidhinatu eka vakyatvat vakyatvat stutyarthena vidhinam shyuhu. That's Mimamsa Sutra 1 to 7, where he's saying that because with the vidhis, these stuti vakyas will make sense, I mean, broadly, and stuti sakankhena vidhina. Okay, and then how the prayojana thing happens and why you should do it, because if a person does ratri yaga, he is very well established in society. That is a general statement from where we are imagining that we have to do some yagas like this if we want well established. I mean, if you want a stature in society where you are very powerfully stationed, you have very good economic and social profile, and people are heeding whatever you say, and they look up to you. If you want that, you have to do Ratri Yaga. Then there is this another discussion, this word, Yajeta. Why are you imagining the word called Sabdi Bhavana, this, that, whether this Laukika Sabda and Vaidika Sabdas mean the same thing? And what is this idea of Sabdi Bhavana? There's a bit of a discussion. So, Yajeta, Yaga Karo. If you imagine the Veda is telling you Yaga Karo, he's saying in Loka Vyavahara, you have Preshana, Yancha, Adhyeshana, Preshana, then Anugya or Anumiti. Between equals, it's Anumiti or Anugya. Between inferiors requesting seniors to do something, that is Yancha or Adhyeshana. And then senior asking the junior or inferior to perform certain actions, it's called Preshana. Now, Yaga Kijiye, if you say Yajeta, now, whether it's Yancha or Adhyeshana or Anumati or Preshana, what does it mean? If you equate and say they mean the one and the same thing, there'll be some confusion. Okay, and therefore they are saying that we have, and then therefore this whole Rajadinam eva pravartakatvat pravartaka vyapara eva hi pravartana pravartakam to Rajadir eva vedasya api anubhava siddham. So therefore he sort of there is a bit of discussion. Why can't you imagine God is giving you these orders? Then he says, no, that is not the best way, because if that is the case, Lord Buddha is also Ishvara. He's an avatar of Lord. And whether you would accept what Buddha says is apramana and what is written in Veda is pramana, no. So that is not the best way. And we had a bit of discussion there. And ultimately, he's saying that, okay, you're imagining that people are driven by God, they're doing it. He's saying, look here, that is for the Agya with these people who are not well versed with the Vedas and stuff like that. We have no problem arguing against what you're saying, but truth of the matter is that the Veda is pramana eva. That Veda is, it's self-evident. There's nothing to add. And he gave that example of there are two wives. One wife is refusing to give alms to a beggar. The other wife comes, that's Subuddhi, and you have Durbuddhi refuses. The well-minded, the nicely, that ethically minded wife comes. The guy, businessman, has two wives. She comes and calls back to the beggar and that particular monk or sadhu and wants to give bhiksha. The dialogue is, what will she say? The other lady was right or wrong or doesn't have authority. Whatever she says can be challenged because both of them are equal. So Buddha and God, because Buddha is an avatar of God, you cannot attribute a higher standing to Veda by saying that these are the words of God. That is not the best way. Anyway, Mimamsakas are not supremely obsessed with the idea of a single God. They have devatas and all. They think everything is created. It was the Srishti thing they are not accepting. It's always there, and therefore you should try for Swarga. And they say, do karma kandas, and all the stories, don't try to explain it away or fight with anyone whether this story is right or wrong, because these are arthavadas. They're essentially giving us a context to do our karma. What is the essential aspect of this? The essential aspect of the Veda is wherever there is an injunction for any work. That is the most important aspect. That is what was discussed yesterday. Therefore, now, Atracha, then we are going to the next paragraph. Atracha prabriti anukula vyaparatvam pravartanatvam shakhando अखंडो वा उपाधिः तस्मिन् विधिपद सख्येपि तद आश्रय विशेष उपस्थिति गवादितुल्य एव. Now there is another new dialogue. He's starting Srimad Usudana Saraswati. What he's trying to say is Prabriti Anukula Vyapara. That is what is Sabdi Bhavana, isn't it? That there is a Prabriti and you have that Anukula Vyapara, as a result of which you have the desire to do something. That is the Prabriti Anukula Vyapara. What he's trying to say is that that itself is Pravartana. Now, can you have a class of things? There is something called Jati and there is something called Upadhi in our philosophical tradition. What is Jati? Jati is not caste here. Jati means what? What can be a point of classification, like Gotwa. That Gotwa, that Gau is Gotwa Vati Gau. That Gau has that Gotwa Guna, and therefore that particular. So if you have a few things having that same dharma or swarupa, then only you can say they belong to one class of things. And there are certain rules for saying whether there is a jati is there or not. There are two very important words here. One is samanya, okay, and there is something called vishesha, and there is something called this jati sabda. And what is that jati sabda? It's very, nityatva sati aneka anugatatvam. That has to be nitya, that's samanya. Jati also, we can use it here. It is nitya. Gotva is nitya. Go vyakti, that individual go is anitya. It will die, it's born, it grows, it's anitya. But Gotva, is there any change? Plato was talking about these ideal types. Nobody pays any attention to Indian philosophy, even though there are very striking similarities. And some of the great researchers now admit that ancient Greek philosophy was heavily influenced by ancient Indian philosophy, early Vedic philosophy. But some people say that later Indian philosophy perhaps was a little influenced by the Greek philosophy, but we do not know much about it. No knowledge. There are the pro-Greek philosophy kind of intellectuals who would say that no, Indians were all influenced. You had the colonial imagination, colonial interpretation, and a lot of modern so-called very progressive intellectuals subscribe, kind of accept this. On the other hand, there are people who are obsessed with the Indian tradition. They say this is the best thing. Maybe we can imagine some sort of a dialectical relationship. But sometimes I wonder when the Sanskrit scholars of today are even least bothered about what is happening in the current intellectual tradition in France or Germany. They don't bother about what Foucault is saying or Derrida is saying. Who is bothered? They are not bothered about what that guy, Structures of Scientific Revolution, Thomas Kuhn is saying about new truths emerging. Is there anyone bothered in Kasi about it? No. Same way the West was never fully focused on what Indians are saying, but these ideas did travel and had a hell of a lot of influence. So we don't know. But I'm just coming back to this notion of what is jati, and Plato was talking about ideal types. Now, this jati, and there is a difference between upadhi. Now, you think about the sky. Can we talk about a class of skies? No, because there is only one akasha. So we cannot talk about many akasas, many skies. So how do you define skyness, that dharma there? We call it an upadhi. So we categorize it. Upadhi is a kind of labeling, a branding, or a category in philosophy. Okay, that's one category. So there is a akhanda upadhi, and there is something called a sakhanda upadhi. What is a sakhanda upadhi and what is a... So the difference between jati and upadhi is very simple. That jati, if you can see its recurrence at many places and with similar dharma, then you can say that there is jati. Now, somebody might say, can you talk about kalasatva and ghatatva? No, kalasatva cannot be jati because there is no difference between ghatatva. Kalasa is just another word. There is only one artha. There are two words referring to one and the same thing. So you cannot talk about kalasatva jati. It's only ghatatva jati. You are having one. So there is something called asambandha. So there are jati vadhaga. There are certain ground rules where jati sabda cannot be used. Okay. So upadhi and jati. These are two different things. And uh, so there is something called an vyakti, and if you have two things are more or less same, okay, and then you cannot use the word jati, and therefore you will use. There is something called sankara thing, like murtatva and bhutatva, and so you cannot have this akasatva and bhutatva. There are certain problems there, okay. Bhutatva and murtatva you cannot have because you cannot together make it a jati. And there is something called anavastha dosha. Like, for example, what is there in ghatatva? What is there in potness? Okay, potness is there in the pot. Okay, ghatatva is in ghata. What is there in ghatatva? Then you will say ghatatvatva, potnessness. Then it will go on and on and on. So you cannot talk about these as a class of things. They call it anavastha dosha because there is a problem of regression. It will go on, and you don't know where to stop. So similarly, there's some ground rules where jati word can be used. Now here we are coming this idea. Why it's coming? This pravartanatva, these Vedic vidhis are injunctions. These are a bit of linguistic philosophy. This pravartanatva, they are saying whether can it be a jati? Is there a class of things? Pravartana, no. It is because what do you mean by pravartana? Different kind of pravartanas. We have different words, but what exactly you are saying here? So that pravartana is, you tell me whether it is sakhanda upadhi or akhanda upadhi. Akhanda upadhi is niravachinna. That means all over the place, like akasatva. You cannot say akasatva is in one corner of the sky, it's not there in another corner. And there is sakhanda, which is this is sakhanda upadhi is savachinna. That is, it's limited to one aspect of it. Okay, so that is what he's saying. So now the arthi bhavna, if you look at it, so it has these three aspects: prabriti, anukula, vyapara. Prabriti, anukula, vyapara. And there you can say it is a sakhanda upadhi. But generally the vidhis of the vidhi per se, that pravartana, that you have to say that is a akhanda upadhi, because that is all over the place. And there is no specificity being discussed. I mean, they are just intricate details of the debate on language in the Vedas. I mean, only if somebody has the patience and doesn't get bored, he will get into all these things. Okay. Tada asraya visheso upasthiti gavadi tulya eva. Then he's saying, like, for example, if you're saying sakhanda or akhanda, because he's saying, like, the ghost of the cowness. In Lokika Vyavahara, we can use that same way. Can we make sense of the Pravartana in the Vedas? Then he's explaining another point. He's saying Anukula Vyaparatvam va Sakyam Prabriti Angsatva Akhyatatvena Sakyantara Labhya Eva. He's saying there are other ways to even make sense of this Pravartana or Anukula Vyaparatvam. What is this Anukula Vyaparavatvam? This Anukula Vyapara is Purusa Prabriti Anukula. Prabriti means he will do this yaga. Anukula is conducive. Vyapara is there is something going on in his mind, that inclination, right? There is a turning around towards doing something. So that is that motivational space in which your attention, your consciousness, your goal or anything, they are just kind of getting aligned with this idea of doing something. That is prabriti, anukula, vyapara. Vyapara is a kind of a transaction thing, right? Some kind of inclination is happening in you. Some movement is happening in you. He's saying va sakyam. And how do you say sakyam? Prabriti angsa astu akhyatatvena. So that prabriti, so you say swarga kama yajeta. So there is a prabriti angsa. स्वर्ग जाने के लिए याग करना चाहिए. One should do this yaga to go to swarga. There is a prabriti angsha. And prabriti anukula vyapara. So the prabriti akhyatatvena yajate, yaj dhatu is coming yaga. And that has two aspects we have again discussed. Yajeta mein there is one, yag kare or yag karna chahiye. There are these two aspects to it. Yag kare or yag karna chahiye. करे में आख्यातत्व धातु अर्थ आ जाता है. That is And that is the broad thing. And then that becomes the karana. Yag kare, kyun karna chahiye, that gyan, that is pravartanatmaka, which is pushing you to do that work. Satyantara labhya eva, and that particular thing, that pravriti angsha is, I mean, they're just doing a bit of hair splitting here. That if you say anukula vyaparatvam, so this is different from yaga, there is something going on there in you. So he's explaining this. Now he's bringing in another example to drive home how the meaning is derived in linguistically speaking. He's giving another. Now, if you say Dandi Purusha, person with a stick, okay, Dandi Purusha. Now, when you say Dandi Purusha, that any pratyaya, Dandi, there is a any pratyaya, the suffix which is getting added. That what does that mean? Dandavan Purusha. Now, this one, Dhanavan, Dandavan, so anything, Aishwaryavan. If you look at that word only one, what is he talking about? Linguistically speaking, he's saying no, it is only talking about a relationship. It is nowhere saying whether you have a danda or you have Aishwarya or you have Jovana or anything. It doesn't say anything, right? That is the first part. That is the Visheshana, that is the adjective. You are, Dandi means what? Dandavan. Danda is the Visheshana. You have that adjective, that this is a person with a stick or a club in your hands. The way you are making sense of it, the Vatu Pratyaya or that Ini Pratyaya, that is only indicative of a Sambandha only, nothing else. Now, when you are talking about Yajeta, if you look at that third aspect, it is nowhere actually indicating that you have to go to Sharga and this and that. It's only talking about a Sambandha. That's only talking about a relationship. Okay? So that phala sadhanata bodha eva prerana tam eva kurban prereko vidhi atra. So phala sadhanata eva preranatvena vidhi sabda pada sakya iti mandana charya. Mandana Mishra, the great, some people say he was a Mimamsak earlier and later on he became Surasaracharya. He had a fight with Sankaracharya, but Mandan Mishra in his own right was a great intellectual. He wrote a famous book called Brahma Siddhi. There is a bit of debate whether he is the same person who became the chief of Sringeri Mutt, and he wrote the great book called Vartika and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and he's called the Vartikakara. He also wrote a great book called Naishkarmya Siddhi. And whether he's the same person, there's a bit of debate. We need not enter there. But Mandanacharya is a great Mimamsa expert who also wrote a book called Brahma Siddhi. Now, he's saying that phala sadhanata, swarg jane ke liye yag, this whole thing, that phala sadhanata, that is what is giving you prerana. If you only look at jajetos yag kare, without having in mind that possibility of going to heaven, those who want to become a millionaire, let them invest in our company. When he's saying, actually, the most important part of it is that, making millions. If you remove it, you should invest in this particular company, nobody will be interested. That's why he's saying, phala sadhanata, and that is what I'm saying. That is what is prerana. That particular thing is giving you inspiration to do it. Phala sadhanata cha artha bhavana Anvaya labhya iti uktam prak. We have already explained that phala sadhanata, that particular thing, arthyavana. Yagena swargam bhavayet. That yag karke swargo ko prapt kare. That is the statement which is mentioned. So we have already explained that arthivavana, how that sort of has these three aspects. That you have kim bhavayet, yagam bhavayet. Kena bhavayet, kim bhavayet, swargam bhavayet. Swargo ko pao. Kena bhavet, yagena bhavet, katham bhavet, then the rules and regulations, everything will come. That what are the details of the yaga, iti kartavyata, katham bhavet, kaise kare, the details will come. So he will study Mimamsa Darsana and all about this vidhi and make sense of it, interpret it. Now he's saying phala sadhanataya cha artha bhavana anvaya labhya iti uktam. Even others agree with it. Imam eva sapakyam partha sarathi Pravriddayah Panditaha. There was a great Mimamsa scholar called Parthasarathi Mishra. One doesn't know whether he was from Mithilanchal or he was from Kashi, but he is a great Mimamsaka and he sort of agrees with this viewpoint. Upanishadanam api Sureshwaracharya and Chichukacharya. Upanishadanam api kesanchit, these two, Ishta sadhanata vadena eva matena upapadaniyaha. So they also agree, this Suresaracharya and Chichukacharya, that bhavana, that prerana, has to make sense. You have to interpret, keeping in mind what goal it helps us achieve it. I am not trying to get into doing the hair splitting, which they do. That is the tradition, highly scholastic. Ishta sadhanatvam swarupena lingadi padasakyam na prernatvena iti tarkikaha. Tarkikaha, whenever they say, it is Nyaya philosophers. Now, what they say, um, these Tarkikas, Nyaya philosophers, Gautama has vidhir vidhayakaha, Nyaya Sutra 2162. What he's saying, vidhir vidhayakaha, vidhi अपने आप विधायक होता है. अब इनका कहना है वो अपने आप विधायक नहीं हो पाएगा. फल जो लिखा हुआ है, कैसे करना, क्या करना है, कैसे करना है, और किसके सहायता से करना है, किम भावेत, केन भावेत, कथम भावेत, इसका जवाब से ही प्रेरणा होता है, ज्ञान भी होता है क्यों करना है. Or if you say that vidhi itself, yajeta, that ta is there, no vidhiling, so that is vidhayaka. If that is the case, yaga, you know what it involves? A lot of heat, sweating, a lot of wastage of money, and then you have to sort of run around to your wife to please her because she has to do her household duties, look after children. If she has a job, she has to do it. She has to take out time to sit next to you. And without looking, if she doesn't look at the ghee that you have for sacrifice, that ghee is impure. So they are the final approving authority in the yagas. The wives have to sit next to you, look at the ghee. In Shankalpa, they have to put their hand on your hand. In some places, they tie their sari with your dhuti or your uttariya. They'll just tie it so that they are giving you, that is one-time support. It's like a power of attorney. They sit next to you. If they are a little lazy, they don't want to touch your hand again and again. They tie their sari, one part of it, the anchal, with one part of your dhoti. I mean, generally the uttariya, they just tie it and then sit as if they are approving everything. It's like one time approval. There are different, these laukika vyavaharas. By end of the day, it's not so easy. Why should anybody be interested in doing a yaga and blow a lot of money and waste a lot of time and then sit next to heat and turn red and sweat? Why? It's dukhatmaka eva. Only because there is a mention that you will go to Swarga, heaven, the wife is also very happy because it's the best resort on beyond earth. So she's happy and she knows she's going to get 50% of the punya as per our rules. So she agrees to give some additional time, and you also agree to take time because you want to go to Swarga. That is the thing here. Now, this Nyayika is saying that link thing, that links of the Vidhipada eva vidhayakaha, that is refuting here. Ishta sadhanatvam swarupena eva, that vidhi swarupena eva lingadipada sakyam, that particular jajeta na prernatvena iti tarkarana, the prerna that it, with that arthi bhavana, ye karne par swarg jayenge. You don't need all that. That vidhipada, it's good enough, people will do it. Tanna, he's saying, no, don't talk like this. Gauravad, anyalabhyatvad, Anvaya or yogacha. They are giving doshas. These are called fallacies in that argument. So in our tradition, we say these are doshavantaha. Okay? And if there is no dosha, we say anavadya. That means there is no dosha in there. So what is dosha here? One is gauravat, kalpana gauravat. There is additional imagination you are doing. Okay? And the second one is anya labhyatvat. So ananya labhya sabdaha. So if any sabda is used, like if I'm using this word, like I'm holding a book, okay, and I'm using the word pustaka. So through this word pustaka, without using it, I cannot reach there. Then only this word will have meaning. If I'm getting another word to refer to the same thing, this word becomes superfluous because there is no niyata sambandha with that artha, what it is referring to. The referent and that particular reference, they should have a very well established relationship, and you should not be able to reach there through any other word. That is what they say in our linguistic philosophy, and that is what he's saying. Gauravat anya labhyatvat. Other ways also you can reach there. Anvaya ayogacha, and it's also difficult to make sense of it. Like, for example, and I'm not going into the details, but very briefly, if you can say that याग करने का इच्छा कैसे होगा? How do you have? He's explaining that in the next, but he will explain. I will just briefly read and then try to be very brief because it's a digression. Anyways, इच्छा विषय साधनत्व अपेक्षया प्रवर्तनात्वम अतिलघुः. Now, in this link thing, yag karo, yag karna chahiye, in this Tarkika Mata, if you say there are 3-4 things they're bringing. First thing, if you say that lingartha is the sakyartha, that itself is referring to the why you should do the vidhi and everything. First thing, there is a ichha, yag karne ke liye. Then there is a ichha vishaya. What is the subject matter? What is the focus of this ichha? And then, what is the means to reach that ichha vishaya? There's a long chain of things which is not evident in the word yajeta, ya karna chahiye. Where is the mention of ichha here? No. And that इच्छा विषय उसको साधना कैसे करना हमारा आर्थिक भावना में घट जाएगा. But in this simplistic thing that विधिर विधायकः ये घट नहीं रहा है. That is what he is saying. And number 2, and that pravartana, that prerana, then that ichha, and that ichha visha ishwarga, and then in order to reach there, that particular pravartana, everything is not available in that word jajeta. So if you say yutishtomena swargakama jajeta, so udvida jajetaha pashukamaha, if you mention that like that, if you mention the kind of vakya and you bring in this idea about arthi bhavana, then it makes sense. So pravartanatva is actually simple. We do not want to, sort of follow what the Tarkika is saying. And there's a bit of hair splitting, not relevant. इच्छा ज्ञानस्यापि प्रवृत्ति ज्ञानवत् प्रवृत्ति हेतुत्व आपातात् वस्तुगत्या च इच्छा विषयः ता साधनम् इति शब्देन प्रतिपादयितुम् अशक्यत्वात्. What I said is saying इच्छा ज्ञानस्यापि प्रवृत्ति ज्ञानवत्. Now, when you have इच्छा ज्ञान, प्रवृत्ति ज्ञान, is it not the same? Are they separate? No, they are more or less the same. प्रवृत्ति का ज्ञान आपको हुआ, ये करना चाहिए, और इच्छा, ये करने पर आपको इच्छा हो रही है. What is end of that? He's saying प्रवृत्ति ज्ञानवत् प्रवृत्ति हेतुत्वात्, and this इच्छा ज्ञान प्रवृत्ति का ज्ञान का हेतु है. If you don't know something, how will you want to have it? You don't know. We have heard about white tigers. Okay. Now just imagine there are violet tigers in some places, but we don't know what is a violet tiger. So where to go to see it? It doesn't create any desire or aspiration or inclination in us. Vastugatya cha ichha visayah tat sadhanam iti sabdena pratipadaitum asakyatvat. And that vastugatya, only if you say that lingadi vishaya, that if you just mention that, also it doesn't make any, it's not easy to conclude. The whole thing is available in that word, vidivakya yajeta. That lingadi, that only that lingadi sabda is can actually motivate us to do anything, doesn't make any sense, doesn't hold much water. And there is a bit of detailed discussion on that. Okay, so I'm not getting into the further elaboration of what he's saying. This is only when we get into the Mimamsa thing that will make sense. Otherwise, it's going to be very boring. Okay. साधनत्व मात्रस्य एव शक्यते च तेन एव प्रयोजन उपस्थापितया प्रवृत्त्या सहस्रत्या तद अन्वय संभवे पदांतर उपस्थापित स्वर्गेण सह वाक्येन तद अन्वय असंभवात् प्रवर्तनात्व एव पर्यवसानं श्रुत्वा वाक्यस्य वादात्. So he is basically driving home the same thing that he has said in several more words. So what he's trying to say is that sadhanatva matrasya eva, that particular sadhana, that yaga, or if you only say yajeta, that is what is mentioned only. Sakyate, that is what, that is sakya sambandho lakshana, that sakya, and saktam padam, that yajeta. So if you only refer to that sakya, is only refer to that, that particular, if you say Cha tena eva pratyena upasthapitaya. And only that yajeta, for then pratyena, that yajeta, that vidiling pratyaya which is there. Prabhritya saha srutya tad anvaya sambhave. And then if you say that uske saath pravritti ke saath, because we are hearing it and we can make sense of it, padantar upasthapita swargena saha, याग करना चाहिए, उसी से ही प्रवृत्ति हो जाएगा, तो फिर स्वर्ग के साथ उसको जोड़कर पदांतर उपस्थापित स्वर्गेण सह वाक्येन तद अन्वय असंभवात्. Because if you say yajeta in itself is good enough to prescribe that you should do a yaga, then you will not be in a position to explain or have motivation, bringing in the additional information, doing anvaya with swarga kamaha, you want to go to heaven. So the goal, the strategy, other things cannot come into the picture. If you only say that one should do it, it's doable, it's desirable, that itself is not sufficient. That is how he's refuting the Nyaya philosophers on the Vidhi thing. Pratyaya sritehe padasrutitah api valyastvena. Now, whenever there is yajeta, so there are two aspects to it. There is prakriti and there is pratyaya. Without pratyaya, prakriti will not make any sense. So you have, if it is pada, that is a noun, there will be prakriti, you know. So suojas, amoutsas, we have that. Balakaha, balako, balakaha, balakam, balako, balakan. So we have these pratyas added. Only balaka doesn't make any sense. Similarly, if you say patha, it doesn't make any sense. Pat doesn't make any sense. That is only dhatu root. So you have tiptas ji, so you have to add that particular pratyaya, that dhatu pratyayas are there. So these tinganta pratyayas have to be added. Suvanta will make it a word, a noun. Tinganta will make it a dhatu rupa. So therefore, without pratyaya, prakriti will not make any sense. However, as per this linguistic philosophy, the pratyaya is more decisive in explaining what is intended to be said, because that particular dhatu doesn't mean anything. Only that pratyaya says, whether it is done in the past, whether it's in the future, whether it is anumati, anugya, preshana, adheshana, pratyayas are all different for this. Okay. Therefore, he's saying that the pratyaya is more powerful than the prakriti, which is that main thing. Okay. From prakriti, that so pratyaya sritehe padasrutitah api valyastva. Pratyaya ko sunna, because that only tells you what it means. Only prakriti doesn't mean anything. That is what he's broadly saying. So pathati, patha doesn't mean anything. Of course, patha means aap padhiye. It makes sense. Pathati means, yeah, someone is studying somebody. It makes sense. Pat doesn't mean anything. So similarly, balaka, it doesn't mean anything. Balakaha, you know there is a boy. Balika, so okay, there is a balikaha, you know there are numerous girls sitting there. So that Suvanta or Tinganta, that Pratyaya Shruti is more powerful than the Prakriti, which is that main part of it. Balyastvena pasuna yajeta ityetra prakrutyartha pasum vihaya pratyayarthena, it's a wrong printing, pratyayarthena karanena saha eva ekatvasya anvayat ekam karanam pasu iti vachana vaktavya. Kratvangam ekattvasya sthitam kimu vaktavnyam padantara samavyavahara rupad vakyad valyastvam iti. So this is very interesting. Why this pratyaya shruti is powerful is explaining. I mean, this is very deep linguistic philosophy in our tradition, but it's good to know that they thought about these intricacies thousands of years back, okay? So there is one sentence called pasuna, there is something called udvida yajeta pasukamaha. Or, for example, pasuna yajeta. Pasuna yajeta. Now, pasu is a ukaranta pulinga sabda. Like munina, pasuna yajeta. पशु के सहायता से याग करे. पशु लिखा है. Okay. Now, is it one or many? How many? And how many people will do? How do you make sense of it? So you are having pasuna is eka vibhaktika. It's tritiya vibhakti, and then pasuna means that is one pasu. So because it is one pasu, pasubhyam, pasuhihi, so pasuna. And because that is this, it is having this one. And therefore, you know that is one pasu has to be sacrificed, not 20 or 30. Okay, number one. Number two, yajeta. And then you know that one person will do it. Because if it were many people, the meaning will also be different. So the pratyas kind of drive home this point. And here, this posum vihaya pratyarthena karanena. The yaga becomes the karana. The instrument for getting your goal is pasu yaga, but that pasu thing is removed. And you are only focusing on that pratyaya, yajeta, karna chahiye. Karanena saha ekatvasya अन्वयाद ekam karanam pasu iti. And what is the means for that yaga? Kena bhavayat yagena pasuna. That is a anga vidhi. So in that particular yaga, there must be a anga. Animal sacrifice is one aspect of it, one paryaya of it. Vachana vyaktya, by this particular word, pasuna iti vaktya kratvangatvam ekatvasya. The kratu is yaga. Anga is that is one part of it. Okay, one part of that whole yaga. Ekatvasya sthitam kiva vaktavyam, and that's how you know that there's only one pashu which is involved here. Then it's refuting. Padantara samavyavahara rupad vakyad valyastvam iti. Now, in our, the science of language, how to make sense of any statement. Okay, this is a big philosophy of language in Mimamsa Darshana. They have certain rules to make sense of any particular statement. And they say that Shruti, Linga, Vakya, Prakarana, Sthana, Samaksha. And the precedent word, what precedes, is more powerful than what succeeds. Samaksha, Yogika Savada. Okay? Shruti is what directly is mentioned in the Veda. So there is no parikalpana, directly you will follow. Linga is that Sabda Samarthya. What is the meaning? Linga is Chinna. So you want to make sense of it. What does it connote? Then first Shruti is not complete in its statement. Then you will go to Linga. Linga also not explaining everything. Then you will go to Vakya. Samavivahara Vakya. That together they are being, you are mentioning it. That together they are it. Then Prakarana. Prakarana is Upakarya Upakaraka Sambandha. There is a Prakarana, the context. What is it? Okay, so it is mentioned. So it must be part of that yaga. So let's do it as part of that yaga, that prakarana. Then sthana. Sthana is krama. Kiske baad kisko karna hai. Then samakhya. Samakhya is what? Yogika sabda. There are different kind of words which are used, which are complicated. What does it mean? So there's a whole lot of discussion on each, because you see, for them, Veda was the only proof. So it's irrefutable. So if there is anything contradictory there, they will say that this contradiction is actually apparent. I mean, I can share with you in the group, there is some lady in Switzerland who is actually working on artificial intelligence who got into this Mimamsa philosophy, and she did some research. It's very interesting. You know what is the context, because that is how it can make sense to us. The Mimamsa philosophy argues that there is no contradiction in Vedas. There could be some mistakes in the way we appreciate or understand it. So what are they saying? That there are a lot of contradictions, apparent contradictions, but holistically speaking, overall, it is indicating one thing. So there are a lot of rules and regulations as to what exactly has to be done. I'll tell you how that becomes very, very interesting for artificial intelligence. So what this lady was working on it, I think she's working on mathematical some research. What she was saying, if Veda is saying this, imagine that there's a vehicle going and it's kind of without a driver, okay? It's moving on its own with AI. And this vehicle is going, there is no driver. There are two children sitting at the back and they're asleep. The car is supposed to take you on its own. Now, suddenly there are two children crossing the road and there is an old person coming from another direction and there is a ambulance taking a patient, is giving a horn, is trying to overtake, and there is a police car coming from the other direction. Okay, and there is a red light or there's a green light, something, and there are 3, 4, 5 things emerging. Now, you also have a lot of sensors and everything, and the car has all these inputs. What decision does it take? Is it going to prioritize the children who are crossing, or we'll have to look at the old person who's coming from another direction, or look and care for that ambulance which is coming at a high speed? It has to take a decision. Otherwise, these two children who are returning from school and sitting at the back are going to die. There is going to be an accident. So, how do you guide them? That is how this person, it's very interesting. I read it somewhere. So she wanted to understand Mimamsa philosophy. And I personally think it's very, very fascinating. So much of it, which sounds like hair splitting, it's very profound in the sense it sheds a lot of light on how meticulously they wanted to work out the fact that there could be apparent contradictions, and the injunctions cannot give any confusing indication as to what exactly has to be done. Therefore, they perfected this whole process of analysis. So this is all coding they are doing, their logic. They are developing the logic as to how to make sense of anything. So whether it is pratyaya there, it is shruti mentioned, that is most important. Then linga, okay, then vakya, then prakarana, the context, then sthana, and then samakhya. So they are looking at all that to make sense of which particular activity has to be followed, or followed with another activity, and with what kind of rules and regulations. Everything is kind of discussed there. That is how it becomes very challenging, because now we don't have the Vedic culture, we are not practicing them. Many of the upakaranas are the instruments, and many of the processes which are mentioned is completely foreign to us. But what we can appreciate is the amount of hard work they have put in to sort of come out with a science where we know how to make sense of any sort of injunctions, and how do we arrive at a point where we can take a decision. That's all about this whole philosophy to my mind, because we are not interested in those karma kandas anymore. But even though the pasu yagas and the sacrifices and all are meaningless, the whole science of decision making and the details with which they were trying to address it is something which perhaps still deserves another look. Okay, so he's saying, therefore, he's saying that Shruti is there very clearly. So, like for example, Yajeta Swarga, Darsha Purnamasa Bhyam Swarga Kamaha Yajeta. If it's there, then the whole thing is very clear. Shruti itself is saying there is no confusion, therefore, we'll not get into these Nyayikas, then imagine a lot of things and then try to draw conclusions. That's a lengthy process. There is Kalpana Gaurava, Anya Labhyatva, we can get it through other meanings and other ways, and therefore it's superfluous. And then Anvaya Ayogya. It's also difficult to derive what you are saying, because you are leaving half of thing what is already mentioned in the Vidyavakya. Okay. Then we are making progress towards the next one. Bhakyartha Anvaya Labhyatvacha na Ishta Sadhanatvam Padartha. Okay. Vakyartha Anvaya Labhyatvat. And the Vakyartha Anvaya, we can make sense of that whole sentence. That's Swarga Kama Yajeta. Na Ishta Sadhanatvam Padartha. So this particular Ishta Sadhanatva is, what is that Ishta Sadhanatva? Is that Yaga. Yajeta, the Nyayika is saying only Yajeta is good enough. That will give you the Vakya. He's saying no, because the total thing you have to take Padartha. So the meaning of the Yajata, just saying that it is the Vidhi thing, is not sufficient. He's pushing on a little further. Tathai Pravartana Karma Bhuta. What is that Pravartana? Karnika Icha. What is the karma? Savdhi Bhavana. What is the karma? The Arthi Bhavana. Purusha Prabriti Rupa. First, there is a general injunction. Next level, there is a specific directive which is emerging, which is called Arthi Bhavana. Rupa Artha Bhavana. King Kena Katham. Iti Ansat Rayavati. This Arthi Bhavana has three aspects. Kya kare, what to do, how to do, with what to do, Kena Bhavayat, and Katham Bhavayat. What is the process? What to do, and what is the strategy, and what are the activities? Katham Bhavayat. The details thereof. Ansat Rayavati Vidhina Alambatvena Pratipadyate. Iti uktam prak. This I have already explained earlier. Therefore, these Nyayikas are not exciting for us. Now, if somebody argues, he's taking that and then he's refuting it. Okay? Apurushartha karmikayam. So if you say apurushartha, the yaga, if the karma is not mentioned there, the swarga word you are not taking into consideration. So purushartha is not brought into picture. You're only saying you work 20 hours a day. Who is interested in it? You have to mention that we have a crisis. We do not want to do any retrenchment. So you have to work 18 hours. Also, maybe you will work 55 hours a week in a week, 55 hours. Then we're going to make this profit. We're going to give you extra dividends. Unless you mention that, people will say even 40 hours is too much. Why should I work 55 hours? So we have to negotiate with people. So, apurusartha karmikayam, if you have that arthi bhavana, so if you are having this bhavana, that pravartanatmaka vakya or whatever, without that karma, the goal thereof, cha tasyam pravartana anupapattehe, nobody will be interested to do anything. Ekapada upasthapitam api apurushartham dhatvartham vihaya. So that yajeta, that is one pada, right? That is the one pada, yajeta. That particular dhatvartha, yajeta, the purushartham dhatvartham vihaya, that purushartha, that is the swarga thing. That api apurushartha dhatvartha, purushartha वहाँ पे नहीं है, only yaga शब्द is there, dhatvartham vihaya, भिन्न पद उपातम अन्य विशेषणम अपि कमिपद संबंधेन साध्यता अन्वय योग्यम स्वर्गम एव पुरुषार्थम सा भाव्यतया अवलंबते. So he's again driving home his point and he's so comprehensive in it. What he's saying is, if you look at the word yajeta, या करना चाहिए, वहां पे वो एक पद जो है उसको ही आप विधि परक बोलेंगे तो देर इज अ विधायकत्व वी कैन नॉट एस्टैब्लिश. व्हाई? Because that is all purushartha. So nobody wants to do a yaga for the heck of it. Why should anyone do? So the purushartha word comes in. So dhatvartham vihaya, you have to, that yaga nobody's interested. You have to work 55 hours a week. Nobody's interested in that. Then you bring in the purushartha. Dividends are going to be twofold. You will get a big holiday, 3 weeks holiday after we deliver this product. So these are the purusharthas you are offering. And then vihaya, bhinna pada upadam anye visheshanam api. That another word is brought in here. What is that word? Swarga kama. Swarga, the person, swargaha kamaha yasya, the person who wants to go to heaven, a person wants to be a millionaire. That additional thing is the would-be millionaire should invest in this product. If you mention like that, that kami pada, kami is that kami, that desire, that kama, swarga kamaha, you bring in that sambandhena sadhyata anvaya yogyam. Then you can say swarga kama, that kama is coming. Then you bring in that understanding that somebody is interested to go to swarga, and therefore swargam eva purushartham. So you know that, okay, end of the day, the goal of my investing in this product is that I want to be a millionaire, or the purpose of my learning this difficult language, Greek or German, is that end of the day I'll get this award and I'll be able to be part of a set of luminaries who are working on classics. There's some purushartha there. Sa bhavyataya avalambate. Bhavyataya. Bhavya means sadhyataya. That is the goal. You want to go to Swarga. You want to be a millionaire. You want to be a man of letters. That is how you want to do this yaga, which is dukhatmaka, in order for gaining that sukham. What is that? That's Swarga Sukha. Okay. Ichha visesya eva kriti visayatva niyamat. And another, you see, there is another complication. ज्ञान जन्या भवेद इच्छा. आपको ज्ञान है कोई चीज का, तब भी इच्छा हो सकता है. If you don't know something, you cannot desire it. I mean, for example, people who are living in 80s, okay, I remember in the early 80s or mid 80s maybe, these phantom comics were uh, very popular. And then there was this guy, Mendrick the Magician or something. I don't remember. These two comics were very popular, and I was reading, in which Phantom is talking to his girlfriend over something, a radio television. There will be some pictures that he's talking to his girlfriend, and she's speaking on a radio television. And I have to think, you see, all the money is here. Somebody should invent a radio television so that on television screen you can see somebody you want to talk to. So we are all in hostel. Imagine if there was a radio television, we don't have to go to class. That was just a fantasy. Okay, it was a scientific fiction. So the difference between scientific reality and scientific fiction, as they say, the joke is time, patience, and more research. The fiction becomes reality. Now, the whole question is here is saying that jnana janya bhavet ichha, but we didn't have the jnana, so we are using the word radio television. Now it's a cell phone, and you talk, you say, what is it called? A video call, and there's so many. Like, I mean, you can see me, and I can see you on the. All this is happening because of what? Technology. So jnana janya bhavet ichha. Ichha janya bhavete kriti. Kritir bhavet. That kriti happens. Kriti is kind of a psychological thing. It's also kriya, but here the initial movements happen in you. Some agitation, some movement in you. Kriti janya bhavete chesta. Then kaika vyavahara. That kaika chesta. You do that physical, you exert yourself. There is once the internal, psychological, intellectual exertion, and then it manifests as physical movement and exertion and involvement. Bhave chesta. Chesta janyam phalam bhave. Once you do that effort, perseverance, you get the result. Okay, that is how he's saying this is suprasiddha ukti. This is what he quotes. Now, why it's mentioned is ichha visayasya eva kriti visayatva niyamat. You cannot have ichha for one thing and kriti for another thing. If you have ichha for being a big author, you cannot have actual kriti, that means some resolution in your mind to be a millionaire. They are contradictory. Okay, ichha and kriti will have sama vishayatva. Swargam kamaiti swarga kamaiti karmani dvitiya antarbhutatvat. So therefore, if you say swarga kamaha, so that swargam kamaiti swarga kamaha or swargaha kamo yasya is a swarga kama, swarga chahane wala, swarga kamaiti karmani dvitiya antarbhutatvat yajatir akarmakatvena, yag kare, soe. Is it transitive or intransitive? Talk to somebody, okay. Plead somebody. These are all transitive, but laughing, sleeping, sitting, and doing yaga, and if you say puja, yes, you are doing devarchana. But yaga, just yaga is one that work. There's no particular thing, so it's intransitive. Therefore, it's a bit of a confusion. Therefore, it can make sense if you bring in this word swarga kama yajeta, swarga ko chahane wala yag kare, means you know what is the goal, going to heaven. Akarmakatvyena swargam ityukter ananyacha, and therefore only if you say jajeta, he's still fighting. He's trying to finish off the opponent. Till the last drop of blood he has, attacking him. The Nyayikas. Ataeva yatra kamipadam na sruyate tatrapi tatkalpyate. So even if swarga kama word is not there, you have to imagine who is that character who is going to do this particular thing. Tatha pratichitanti hava ye eta ratrir rupayanti. So those who do the ratri yaga, they are very well established. So obviously that kamipada, that pratishtha kama, that you have to imagine, that the one who wants to be established. Ityadu pratishtha kama ratri satram upeyuhu ityadi. So those who are pratishtha kama, plural is pratishtha kamaha, they will do the ratri satra upeyuhu. So if you go to Assam, you have those satras. The satra yaga is 11 days or more. It's several days, and they will have this yaga. This tradition was very much there in parts of Bengal and Assam. Evam cha labdha bhavyayam tasyam samanapada upastito dhatvartha eva karanataya anveti bhabhyansasya kami vishena abiruddhatvad subvibhakti yogye dhatvarthanam namadhe jyotistamadu tritiya shravana. Is further stretching it and elaborating and explaining it, that whenever there is a labdha bhavya, okay, that particular thing, swarga, tasyam, in that case, samana pada upastito, that yajeta, that is only one word only. Dhatvartha eva karanataya. That becomes the means. Anveti bhabyansa with swarga. Ya karne par swarga jayega. And who will do it? Kami vishena swarga. That swarga kam. The matter of your desire is the swarga vishena aviradvata. There is no contradiction. Subvibhakti yogye swarga kama. That is subvibhakti because it is a subanta pada. This is a noun. Vyakti yogye dhatvartha namadehe. And that dhatvartha yajeta. Yotishthamena yajeta swarga kamaha. Yotishtama ke dwara. Yotistam here is not a anga like dadna juhoti. Dahi ka sacrifice kare. Indriya kamaha. No, it's not like that here. Here it is namadheya. What is namadheya? Is bringing in a new topic of discussion. Namadheya is essentially about the name of that particular yaga. Okay, so we have crossed the time. A little is there. I'll wind it up tomorrow. So I'm just stopping here. And if you have any questions, you can ask, or we will, yeah. Any questions, or we'll do the Shanti mantras? We'll do the Shanti mantras. Om